All right, getting into some fascinating stuff today, diving deep into child psychology and specifically that triangle of control, anxiety, and oppositional behavior. We got this article sent in. Control, anxiety, and oppositional behavior at home and school, just from May 11th this year. So really recent stuff. Sounds like you're looking to really break down these connections.
You're spot on there. This article really grabbed my attention because it just skips those simplistic takes on oppositional behavior and, the whole kids these days kind of thing.
Yeah.
Gets right to the deeper needs that are often driving it all.
It's true. Like they always say, all behavior is communication in some way, right? And what really struck me was the author's background, 13 years working with kids, the whole spectrum from autism and ADHD to ODD, and a parent on top of it. Talk about real-world experience.
Definitely brings a weight of authenticity to it all. Having seen these things play out both professionally and personally is huge, and that's where things get really interesting. One of the core arguments the article makes is this strong connection between a child feeling in control, or lacking it rather, and how much anxiety they're feeling.
Okay, so let's unpack this control anxiety link because I can already tell this is something we miss all the time, even as adults.
Oh, absolutely. The article breaks perceived control down into two basic types, internal and external. Internal control, that's all about a child believing they can handle their own emotions, their own reactions to things. Like, that classic toddler meltdown because they can't have yet another cookie? Textbook example of internal control going out the window. They haven't quite figured out how to regulate those big feelings yet.
And who are we kidding? Who hasn't felt a bit like that toddler every now and then? Deadlines piling up, that to-do list is a mile long. Suddenly that extra cookie doesn't seem like such a bad idea.
Right. We might have fancier coping strategies as adults, but that core desire for control, it doesn't go away. Now, when we're talking external control in kids, think of it as how much influence they think they have over what's happening around them, their daily schedule, how people interact with them, even just knowing what's coming next. When that sense of predictability crumbles, their anxiety tends to shoot up because they feel powerless, like they can't impact their own world.
Okay, now this is really hitting home. I was such a routine kid growing up. Any little change to the schedule and I was totally thrown. Makes you wonder if that was tied into this need for external control that I didn't even realize I had.
It's definitely possible. And that leads us to a crucial point the article raises. It's so easy to just see a child complying and think, that's the goal, we won. But forcing that compliance, especially with neurodivergent kids who might process things differently, it can really backfire.
So we're talking about those times when a kid just puts their foot down, refusing to do what they're told. Easy to just label it as defiance, but it sounds like it could be way more complicated than that.
Oh, for sure. Imagine a kid right in the middle of building this epic block tower, totally engrossed, and someone just says, all right, time to go. On the surface, refusing to leave seems like classic disobedience. But what if to them, leaving that tower unfinished, it's like this deeply unsettling feeling, maybe even anxiety-inducing? Their whole sense of order and completion, it's disrupted, and that can be really upsetting. Like, their little world just got thrown into chaos, and that no is their way of trying to grab back some control over the situation.
Exactly. And this is where the articles focus on why compliance isn't always the victory it seems to be. It really comes into play, especially when we're talking about neurodivergent kids who might be experiencing sensory input differently or just processing the world in a different way. Forcing compliance without addressing that underlying anxiety, it can actually do more harm than good.
It's about understanding the why behind the resistance, not just getting them to do the thing.
Right. There's this great example in the article, a kid seemingly refusing to leave for school, classic oppositional behavior you'd think. But when they looked closer, turned out they were actually waiting for their friend who was still over at the snack table finishing up. Wow, so what looked like defiance was actually them trying to honor a social commitment that was important to them. I never would have seen it that way.
Perfect example of how easy it is for adults to misinterpret a situation when we don't take the time to understand the child's perspective. For that child, sticking to their routine and that unspoken social agreement, that was crucial. Especially for an autistic child who thrives on predictability and those clear social cues, disrupting that can be really disorienting.
You really have to consider the context. But knowing all this is one thing, actually putting it into practice feels like a whole other challenge. Luckily, the article doesn't leave us hanging. They actually give us 1313 strategies to deal with oppositional behavior in a way that tackles those deeper needs for control and helps reduce anxiety.
And hey, no need to memorize all 13. Some are going to be more useful than others depending on your situation. But one common thread I found super helpful was this emphasis on routine and predictability, especially for kids who really thrive on that external structure. Visual schedules, keeping consistent routines, communicating expectations clearly. These things can be absolute game changers.
It's like those first then boards people use, right? Like first we brush our teeth, then we get to read a bedtime story.
Exactly. It gives kids that visual roadmap of what to expect, which can really help lower anxiety around transitions or unexpected events. And within that structure, offering choices wherever you can be super empowering. Instead of a flat, time for bed, try something like, okay, bedtime, want to read one book or two tonight. You're still setting that boundary, but you're giving them a little say in how things go.
That's so smart. Because it's not about giving up all control. It's about sharing it in a way that lets kids feel heard and respected.
Absolutely. Finding that balance between structure and flexibility is key. Another strategy that really stuck with me was this idea of ignoring secondary behaviors.
Okay, that one sounds kind of tricky. What does it even mean to ignore a behavior? Shouldn't we be addressing those?
We do, but not always right in the heat of the moment. Secondary behaviors, they're like those attention-grabbing tactics that kids sometimes use when they're feeling unheard or like they have zero control over a situation. Think like whining, arguing, even some mild aggression. It's easy to get totally caught up reacting to that, but a lot of times it's a smokescreen for something bigger going on.
So it's like they're saying, hey, pay attention to this underlying anxiety I'm feeling, not just the way it's coming out right now.
Exactly. And while it's important to address those behaviors eventually, getting into a power struggle right then and there usually just makes things escalate. Instead, try to figure out what the root cause is. Is the child feeling overwhelmed, powerless, misunderstood?
It's like that saying, kids do well if they can. It's not always about them lacking willpower or trying to be difficult. There's usually something deeper going on.
You got it. And here's where this article gets really interesting, almost a bit meta. It got me thinking, how much of this control anxiety thing, how much is that happening in adults too? I mean, we all know that feeling, right? When things feel out of control and the anxiety kicks in.
Wait a minute, are you saying those of us with our color-coded to-do lists and our sock drawers organized just so, are we just channeling our inner 5-year-old here? Because guilty is charged.
Well, maybe. But seriously, it makes you wonder how much of our adult behavior, especially when we're stressed, might just be rooted in this primal need to feel in control. Think about those classic reactions to feeling overwhelmed. Some people shut down completely, others need to micromanage every little detail, maybe get a little, shall we say, forceful with their opinions.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing all those everyday interactions in a whole new light now.
Mhm.
And it's not just the big reactions either. Even those subtle things, like someone who always has to have the last word in every conversation, maybe that's their way of holding on to a little bit of control in that moment.
Exactly. And this isn't about putting labels on people or playing armchair psychologists. It's about building awareness. When we understand these underlying dynamics in ourselves and the people around us, it creates space for more empathy, more patience, maybe even a little humor when things get tense.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. Not only do I feel like I've learned so much about how kids' minds work, but it's given me a lot to think about in terms of my own reactions to stress and control. Who knew an article about oppositional behavior would have me reflecting on my sock drawer?
There you have it. That's the beauty of learning, those unexpected connections and aha moments.
Couldn't agree more. And to our listener, if this deep dive sparked your curiosity, don't stop here. Think of this as just the starting point. There's a ton of great resources out there on child development, anxiety, and how to build positive communication strategies. Keep exploring, keep asking those great questions, and remember, every interaction, it's a chance to learn and grow.